So, after some intense network analysis, we all know it, we're very hungry, we're starving, so we prepare ourselves some lunch. But our mind is still racing about all those IP addresses and domains and whatsoever, so that when we leave the building, we simply forget to turn off the oven. And before we know it, the whole building's on fire. And destroys all digital evidence on site. And to solve problems like these, Manon Fischer from University of Lausanne is going to talk about distant traces and their use in crime scene investigations.
So, hello everyone. As he told, I'm Manon Fischer from the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. And today it would be the first time I present this research in front of a lot of persons. So I'm really happy to be here to share with you the first result I get. Today I would like to talk with you about a field that I think is quite interesting. Complex, but also so prevailing. Every day we use our smartphone to send some messages on WhatsApp, to take pictures and put them on Instagram, or to just start the cleaning cycle of our robot vacuum cleaner, if you have one. And all these events will generate some traces, and these traces can be stored on their own servers, the remote servers. And so I talk about distance or remote service traces in this case. But the main question is, these traces can be useful for criminal investigation? And I decided to start my PhD 1.5 years ago to start to answer to these questions and to know if these distant traces can be useful and how they can be used for criminal investigation. I think the best way to start is just show you a little example, and I think I would like to convince you that these traces can be just crucial for investigation. And for this investigation, we start in this apartment. But a fire happens and so, there are not a lot of things that are still in the apartment. And you are called as an investigator to just investigate the place. You can see that all the apartment is burned, and it's difficult, near impossible to know what happens and to answer to the two main questions you can have in fire investigation. The first one, it's about the origin and the cause of the fire. And the second one, it's about the chronology of the fire. So you want to know how the fire develops in order to better understand the event. Sorry. Oh, okay. But you are in this place, but a few weeks ago you heard about the traces that can be generated by smart devices, and you think that in this case it can be very helpful if you find some into. So you decided to interview the owner of the apartment to know if some smart devices were present in the apartment during the fire. And he told you that a smart weather station was in the main room where the fire happens. So now you know that probably you have some traces on this device. But also when you're searching in remains, you find this thing, that it's a little motherboard that is linked to a plug. So maybe it could be a smart plug. So now you have two devices to investigate and to know if there are some traces on. For those who participate in the poster session yesterday, and saw the presentation of Francesco Servida, it's not the same case as he showed you, but it's another one, because we also set fire to another apartment to try to generate some traces. So it's another type of traces. It's not the same smart object, as you can see. But the main question now is, where are the digital evidence, where I have to look into. You have three main places where you can find some digital evidence from the smart devices. You will find some information in the memory, also in the application on the smartphone that is linked to the smart devices. And mainly you will find some traces on remote servers, because this the IoT have a small amount of storage, so they will send a lot of data outside on remote servers. So it's quite important to study this part, and it's the aim of my presentation. And to get these traces, we send some legal requests to get them, and I will explain just after that how to do that. First, from the smart weather station, we obtain this data. It's the temperature, the measure of temperature versus time, and you can see that the temperature increased from 14 degrees to almost 90 degrees in only 6 minutes. So with this observation, you can think that the fire starts during this period of time. So now you have an idea when the fire starts. But now we will look at the smart plug data we get. In this case, we obtain the measure of the power versus time, and you can see that there is a sudden increase of the power from 0 to 1020 watts in only 7 seconds. So you can think that something was plugged into and just consume some electricity. So you have these two information, and you can see that this increase of power is just few minutes before the start of the fire. So now with these two elements, you can make the hypothesis that the fire started because of this increase of power. So now you can just answer to the two main questions as asked before for fire investigation. The first one of the chronology of the fire, because you have an idea when it starts, and after you can have an idea of the cause, that it's probably electrical, and about the origin, that it's in the area of the plug or on the smart plug, or maybe the thing that was plugged into. With this result, you can see that if you don't have these traces, if you don't think about the distant traces, you will miss something and you can't answer to the two main questions. So it's important to think about it when you are on crime scene, to consider them as part of the crime scene. But I think now you want to know how we collect the data in this case, because it's why you want to know. The first step to do that is to know if some devices generate traces and can be collected. It's what we do in this case, because we see that there are some smart devices on the crime scene, and so you know that there are probably distant traces. After that, you need to get some identifying information in order to do the legal request afterwards. The identifying information can be the identifier, like the email address, or some information about the account. It can be information also for smart devices about the brand and model, and also of the serial number that identify the object. So it's important to get these things also. And it's important also to ask quickly for this data, because this data can sometimes disappear, and so it's important to just ask very quickly for this data to integrate them very quickly in the procedure. And finally, about the legal request, in this case, we get the traces under the GDPR request, because it's our account, so we can have access to our data, and it's why we use that. I use that for this research because it's easier to have an idea of the choices that can be generated. But it's not, you cannot use it for investigation purposes. So it's only for the moment for research to have an easy access to the data and to have a better idea of the choices you can find on this account. For the law enforcement request, you have two ways to do, but I will only talk about what is happening in Switzerland because I don't know yet how this happened for the other country. Yeah. And in Switzerland, depends on where the data are stored, on where the servers are, you will not do the same request. So if the data are stored on server in Switzerland, you will do a Swiss request to be simple. And if it's not, you have to do your request under the International Mutual Legal Assistance to get the data. But there are some limitations to this work. Something that it's more complex is that, as I told you, the regulation will depend on the country where you are. So for the moment, I can't explain to you all this work for the other country, but maybe the continuing of my work, I will just go deeper in that. And when you obtain the data, you will receive the data in multiple file formats. So you will have some CSV, JSON, HTML, not complicated file format because all of us can read them, but it's sometimes difficult to put all this data together to have a unique information. To continue my work, I would like to also consider the social media data that can also generate some distant traces, and that can be also very useful, depends on the investigation where you are. Also the smart devices, I think I will continue to study more in detail for this type of object because, as you see, it's quite important. And there are a lot of things to do. I don't know if we plan to burn another apartment, but yes, we will see. And also, I would like to compare in my work the content I get from the law enforcement request and from my personal data request to see if there are some differences between the two of them. And so I work at the police now to do that, to have a better understanding of that. And finally, I would like to implement something about the visualization to give to the investigator, for example, just a graph that it's simple to read, to understand, because they don't want to go in to look at the JSON files, but they want to have an explanation, a timeline of what happens, that it's easier to read. I would like to conclude my work on that slide. We consider just a crime scene with just traditional traces as DNA, fingerprint, or shoe print. That is quite normal, but for a few years now, we also add the digital evidence on crime scene. But now, we have to consider also the distant traces as part of the crime scene investigation. We have to extend this crime scene not only on what you can see on the crime scene, but with all the traces that can be also outside of the crime scene. These distant traces or remote traces can be very useful for a lot of investigation, as missing person case, for robbery, for fire, as I showed you with my example, but also for murder. And this is the case for the Jubilar case that happened in France, I think, in 2020. A woman disappeared and her husband is the main suspect of the case. And the French police decided to ask Google to provide his location history to know if he was the murderer and also to find maybe the body of the woman. As this data are stored on Google server in US, a judge has to order Google to send this data by the International Mutual Legal Assistance, as I told you just before. I would like to thank you, the FAU, for the scholarship they give me to participate to the Women in Forensic and also to the DFLWS. Give me the opportunity to just present you my work, so thank you for that. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much. And as usual, any questions from the audience here or on Zoom?
Thank you for the talk. How confident are you on, do you get some information from the providers on what fields are given? I'm asking especially for timestamps. Like, how, do they tell you if the time are the time from the device or the time where the event was received on the server, or this kind of information?
It's quite complicated. Sorry. It's quite complicated to know what data they send to us and why sometimes we have some data and why sometimes we have no data, because when we generate the traces, we expect some data and sometimes we don't get that, but I don't have any explanation. Sometimes when you do some request, they send you, in the better case, an explanation of what is this information in the CSV file, for example, but it's not the majority of the case, and sometimes you just have to guess what is it, and yeah.
Does it? You want to continue? You do. Okay, thank you. I saw there's one more question in the chat.
We have several questions in the chat. This is exciting. So first question is from Christian Mueller. He asks, did you try to get information from Alexa and the like before? If so, what kind of data did you get?
I tried once, and but just to do some experiment. It's not just a full experiment. And I get some audio from the command I sent to the Alexa, but not all the command I sent. So that's why I don't understand what, if they have the data of, if the data recorded, I don't know, but yeah, I obtained these traces.
Brilliant, thank you. And we have another question. Did you try to fetch some data from the burnt devices?
Yeah, on the memory
Yeah, I imagine on the
Anywhere.
ROM or RAM
yeah.
chip. Or
burnt to death.
We can have some information into the memory of the device, but it's not my work, it's the work of Francesco Servida, because we split our work. It's better for that. And so we can find some information, but it's difficult to read the memory and after to understand also the structure of the data into the memory. So we try that, and it's not. The main problem also is to recognize the object on the crime scene and after to read the data. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
Perfect. If there's no more question, I got one. You were talking about how to collect the evidence, and you were saying you have to ask quickly because it can disappear.
Yeah.
So my question would be, from what you've seen so far, is it possible for people, because you're the owner of these devices, to delete the data on the remote servers, or is that something which is not possible?
Yeah, it's possible with the GDPR regulation. It authorizes you to have a look to your data, to modify your data, and also to delete your data. So it's possible to lose this data by this way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Cool, thank you.